Well, I think your final words and the final slide, or the final two slides, were basically the perfect introduction for me to introduce you to our next panel. Business powered by AI. Han, please have a seat already. Get yourself cozy. AI and machine learning models, is this actually the same, or is there anything else we understand? What is the socio-economic question and the impact of AI? I kindly ask to welcome on stage Jochen Borenich, member of Managing Board at Kapsch Businesscom, Kurt Chadha, Vice President of Group Business Development and Managing Director CEE at Wirecard, Katharina van Delden, founder and CEO of Inusabi, Han Xiao we already introduced, and the panel will be moderated by Christopher Keller, Head of Business Development from The Telegraph. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Do we get a spot?
Han, thank you very, very much for that absolutely inspiring and awe-inspiring talk. I think there was a lot of innovation, a lot of inspiration for the room there, and I like the fact that you started with this, you ended with this amazing segue into our talk today, and you touched on many of the social impact, the AI for good, and we're going to spend the next sort of 40 minutes talking about the impact for business. But before we do that, I just want to take one step back and ask you, nowadays, when you go to conferences, everyone's talking about AI, and what they actually mean is an algorithm, and everything that's got an algorithm is automatically referred to as an AI. So what can you just summarize briefly for us? What is the difference between a standard algorithm and AI? And is AI the same as machine learning, or is there a difference?
Yeah, so the two concepts that we frequently from people from the community is, one is machine learning, the other is artificial intelligence. I think they are basically I'm an engineer by training. So to me, they seem like both the same thing, but they have different focus. Machine learning focus more on the algorithm, more on the theoretical side, where AI, when people talk about AI, it's all about an end-to-end user experience. So I guess this is actually the fundamental difference between artificial intelligence and machine learning. Yeah.
And what is the difference between machine learning and a normal algorithm?
So machine learning algorithm is usually data-driven, where normal algorithm or ordinary algorithm is probably not. It's based on rule-based. It could be based on simple logic. Where in machine learning algorithm, you always have to you do not set particular logic to the algorithm. You let the algorithm find out based on the data it receives. Right.
So I want to start by sort of going through. I think you mentioned it at the end of your talk. There are a lot of fears about AI. There are a lot of myths about AI, and I want us to sort of start. Maybe we can make some inroads into busting some of these and taking away some of that fear. What do you think? Katharina, what's your perspective on this? Do you think AI algorithms are going to make us all obsolete, and white-collar workers, we're all going to lose our jobs, and it's all going to be done by machines? Or are there, in fact, limitations to AI, and are there things humans can do much, much better than AI can today?
Let me answer it in a very short question back to you. Do we think that an AI in the future can meditate? Can it pray? And I think just thinking about this type of question brings us to the core, where we as humans, with our ability to be creative, to be emotional, to be empathetic, still have kind of our place and our value in the world of AI. And once we focus on these very human qualities, and we ask ourselves, how can we strive and be more successful and also be more healthy and more at the core of what makes us happy? When we ask ourselves that, we instantly turn the conversation around AI to asking ourselves, how can AI help us to achieve that? And instead of perceiving AI as a threat.
So Han, given that AI algorithms nowadays can already compose music. What's the difference? Where do we have the edge? Is it human creativity that gives us an edge over AI, or what's going to stop the machines taking over?
This is a very, let's say, philosophical question that where the intelligence really come from. Right. So I think nowadays AI can compose music because AI algorithm finds out the pattern in the music composition. Right. But this pattern is is hidden in the data. Right. But the intelligence doesn't come from data alone. Intelligence comes from interaction. The interaction between human with another human, the interaction between human with the environment. So if you think about the machine learning algorithm, data mining algorithm, that sometimes it seems that they review some intelligence, but these are not intelligence. This is to the maximum extent, we call it pattern recognition, because it just recognizes some underlying pattern behind the data. The real intelligence comes from interaction.
So basically, humans, I think the takeaway is humans are more multifaceted than an AI could ever be or can be today, and also it can't replicate the human interaction that drives the world. I want us to start talking a little bit about the impact on business and how businesses are using AI. Kurt, you at Wirecard obviously are also using AI. What's sort of your use case at the moment?
I think to pick up on what Hans said, I think what's really important is that our jobs are just going to change, right? The way we do marketing is going to change. The way we do consumer protection is going to change, right? The way we drive analytics to convert business opportunities is going to change. And the way we look at it, right? I would also argue that machine learning is probably the more interesting term that I had referred to. And a machine can only be so smart as, I would say, the human being that develops the machine or that feeds the machine or that uses it. And I think that's the big opportunity in the digital lifetime, is all of the data that we collect. And the better the data quality, the more, I would say, widespread out the data that we have in our digital economy, the smarter the machines can be. And I think from a payments or financial services perspective, I 100% agree. AI is, for me, the end-to-end experience of a process, versus machine learning might be a part of the process. And where a payment company sits is maybe the last part of a commerce process, right? And the way payment companies can use machine learning, data analytics is in many ways. I just want to maybe start with one. It's all about driving more traffic, driving more conversion for businesses. And we heard in the morning, I think the digital economy tells us I can consume everywhere, and every consumption in this world, I think, is gonna, at some point in time, things stop to be for free, right? And there's always gonna be a money movement. And that's where we come in, and we can discuss more.
So what are the discrete use cases you're using AI for? So you mentioned sort of, I guess it's sort of shopping baskets, optimization at the end by being able to suggest, oh, you like this, so you're probably going to like that.
Correct.
Are there any other use cases?
Yeah, I would say in commerce, it's all about individualization of offers, and the more tailor-made and the more individual I can be for a consumer, the more likely he's going to be to make a purchase, right? And that's the same for payment. The more tailor-made I can make my payment option, my payment experience to the individual consumer, based on pure data, the data that the machine analyzes, the more likely he's gonna convert. But it also, I would say, flips to the other side. Our mission is also to protect our customers, right? And it's all about using the data that we get out through our platforms to protect businesses from fraudulent consumers, right? And the better our machines are, the better data scientists work on them, the less bad customers or fraud our customers are going to experience.
I like that point you made at the end about fraud, because of course security and safety and also sort of I guess data security is a huge issue now. And Jochen, you do a lot of work in that field. Are you seeing with the clients you work with, an increase in how companies are thinking about data security, how they're thinking about how they can use AI more effectively to help with that problem?
Yes, we see it especially in Europe, but let me come back first to the point that you raised before. What's changing in the business environment? If you have a broader look on it, you can see in former times we came from a hunter-gatherer society to a settled agriculture society, because we found out it's much more efficient, and this was the possibility more or less to feed the growing human population with food. Yeah? And the thing that we need now to grow is information and knowledge, and we can make technology for us available to feed the need for getting knowledge and information to do our jobs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll give you examples, some use cases, for instance. Just look at the health sector, for instance. If a doctor wants to have a holistic view on a patient, he has to hunt and to collect a lot of data at the moment, like in former times. He has to call other doctors and try to collect information from various kinds of data sources. If you give a doctor a real-time perspective on a patient, to be able to give him a more accurate decision, and he can treat more patients and concentrate on other things like communicating, show empathy with the patient. This makes us much more efficient, and we give him the information and the knowledge needed. Just an example that we're working on, just look on the topic of interactions between medicines. If you take several medicines, you have a lot of interactions, also based on your personal vital data. And it takes a lot of effort for a doctor on an individual basis to analyze this. And if we put this into one perspective, and this is what we're doing via an AI engine, to look all these cross interactions between medicines, combine it with personal data, that gives a comfort for the patient to be best treated, but also is much more efficient for a doctor to treat the patient. This example. But let's take this example. You see, especially in this example, that privacy and security is extremely important when you treat patient data. So, with all respect,
patient data leaks has been in the news this week across the world, with patient data being readily available and being stored on unsafe servers and all that problem. But we can assume, I think, that those will be solved, those problems.
Right. And if you look at the topic of GDPR, we are all complaining, especially in the IT sector, the GDPR topic, but it could also be used as an advantage, especially in the AI sector, when we treat data with a high importance of privacy and security. This could also be an advantage, a competitive advantage, from my perspective, for the European AI providers. If we take this aspect in really serious, and therefore I think the combination will be the winning point.
I think that's a really important one, and it's one that I want to get back to, because you started talking about is GDPR going to give us an edge? Because the big fear was that GDPR was going to hold us back, and that companies in China who don't have to worry about that can be much more free in how they test. But I want to get back to that question. Before that, I want to talk about again how AI is changing companies already. You've just highlighted this I think really good point, that it suddenly makes information available much more quickly than it has ever been available, and it makes us much more efficient. I want to get back to the point that Han made about human interactions being at the heart of everything. And Katarina, you've been doing a lot of work on this as well. So can AI, it's going to make us more efficient, we've just established that. Is it going to change the way we interact with each other in companies as well?
The super short answer, yes. But well, we have some more minutes. So the development I see is that basically every single person in top management you ask across all industries, what is on the top of their agenda, it's the speed of innovation. And they prioritize the speed, the velocity of innovation because of new digital competitors, because of the new digital environment. And what has happened in the last couple of years, that they have realized they can gain speed by interacting and collaborating with the ecosystem, by innovating together with suppliers, with customers, with employees who were not involved before. And many companies have done quite an amazing job of establishing initiatives like customer co-creation panels, design thinking labs, hackathons, and some even see that very critical. You know, they say it's kind of a circus of digital initiatives or innovation initiatives. And but I see that as a very positive thing, because they started experimenting with approaches and programs. But now we are at a stage where all these programs were designed to bring speed, and maybe every single one does, but if you look at it as a whole, and especially large corporations usually have hundreds of these initiatives around data, around innovation and digitalization, the individual person who wants to navigate the system really gets lost by all the options. If you have a good idea, if you have a business challenge you want to solve in your organization, how do you know if you go to the idea management, to customer co-creation, and in the worst case they just say, oh, forget it, I put my idea in my desk. So the development we're seeing right now, and that we're driving with Inosabi as well, is that we say, can we not use AI in order to just make sense of that chaos, and use all the individual initiatives that already are designed to bring speed to an organization, to make them more accessible, to kind of navigate through that landscape. And what the first companies are establishing today is kind of they call it the one-stop shop for innovation, where basically they aggregate all these initiatives, the hackathon, the design thinking, and so on. And with a chatbot assistant and a very intelligent search, they make it accessible. So they just ask, what's your idea? Have you thought about this person who might be your coach? Do you know there's budget in this and that area? And that is enhanced with data that's relevant for innovation, coming from patents, coming from startup databases, from tech blogs, and enhancing this experience. So not only what's your idea, here's a coach, but also what's your idea, do you know there's a patent relevant to it, do you know there's an article on the tech blog? And coming back to your question, how does AI change the way we work in organizations? At the nucleus of innovation management and ideation, I see that it has a huge impact on the way how we find, let's say, partners in crime to innovate with, how we find people to collaborate with, how we find knowledge, how we come together, how we develop ideas. And that is quite the opposite of what we've seen historically in companies, where innovation was guarded behind walls, where it was the most secretive topic of them all. And that's why we see that the development to use collaboration, openness, and ultimately data analytics and AI in innovation management is really changing a culture of a company. It's changing the way we work together. And this is why I see the way how innovation management is changing today as a nucleus of describing of how the overall way we are working together is changing. You know, we are not working in hierarchical organizations anymore in the future, in my opinion. We will be working in ecosystems and networks, collaborating with the people who have the right knowledge and finding the data when we need it.
So basically, by being able to spot who I need to speak to about a certain topic in order to make progress much more quickly, much more efficiently, we're breaking down the barriers and the boundaries and to a certain extent the structure within a company. But then we're also perhaps breaking down those structures that are sort of the shell of the company, and we're sort of allowing so that cross-pollination. Now, Kurt, I mean, you work for one of the biggest German companies now. And my question to you is that something you're also seeing, that, you know, R&D, things that were really secretive years ago, are now much more fluid, open topics that you collaborate with others?
I would definitely agree. So I think the two big things have been broken down. Once, I think a geography is not what a geography used to be, or a country is not what it used to be, right? In our world, everything's global, right? Technology does not speak a certain language, right? It should be accessible by anyone. And that's how I would also say why innovation is getting quicker and quicker, because especially in our industry, you also tend to view competition more differently, right? It's not so much more about us against them or me against you, right? It's about how do you best provide value together for the customers you serve, right? And especially in financial services, you're not gonna conquer the world on your own, right? So the whole technical platform idea, I think was a forefront where that started, but I think it also is evolving to a commercial platform idea where companies just collaborate across technologies, platforms, and borders, and that's to get the spin back to AI, right? The broader you are, the bigger the external influences in terms of data is, and the smarter you're going to be about developing your own business forward.
So Jochen, one question I have, because we talk a lot about, and Hans showed it you just showed it in your presentation. When you see the companies that are filing most patents, that are filing most papers on AI right now, it's the big American companies. It's Google, it's Microsoft, it's Facebook, it's Amazon, and it's big companies like Tencent in China. You don't see many small companies making inroads here. And what we've witnessed over the last decades in many, many industries is this sort of big emergence of oligopolies. So we've got fewer and fewer players in the energy market, fewer and fewer players in the healthcare market, and fewer and fewer players in the tech market as well. You've got a real sort of market concentration. Jochen, do you think AI is going to be something that only big companies can afford to implement because they're the only companies that can have the big budgets to hire all this talent, and it's going to further increase this market concentration? Or are you more optimistic that there are use cases and for smaller companies, and actually it might be a technology that somehow does become accessible to companies, smaller companies?
Especially in this area, I see still opportunities also for small and medium businesses to be involved. I'll give you some examples. Of course, it's difficult to develop algorithms. Of course, it's difficult to do the annotation of data, meaning to labeling the data to be prepared for machine learning. Of course, it's difficult to train the people. Yeah? But on the other hand, there are a lot of cloud services available that you can use, with technologies that in former times that was reserved for NASA or other institutions. So it's quite easy accessible. That's one point. The second point, there are many pre-defined, pre-developed platforms. We're also providing one of them to small and medium businesses where they can just play around and test it. And I think a great advantage, that especially in this AI area, there's a huge open source community. Yeah. They collaborate cross-continent. If somebody has a problem with image recognition, other ones are playing on it, they're solving it, they put it on the net. Yeah. You integrate it in your platform. So it's quite a fluid development. So if you're into this community, you have the possibility, even with a smaller budget, R&D budget than Tencent, but even then to keep pace and to be part of this open source community. So I still see a chance for smaller companies, for certain use cases. And if you break it down now on continents, for instance, for Europe in the B2B sector, the health sector, in the manufacturing sector, I'm sure that we find our niches.
By the way, if anyone's got any questions you'd like to ask, in about 2 minutes, I'll ask for audience questions. So think about if there's anything you want to ask these guys, and we'll give you an opportunity. But just staying on this topic, Katharina, if we're going to be, AI is helping us dismantle the internal structures of organization. It's helping us, as Kurt just said, with collaborating. And Jochen also sees a potential for smaller companies to be able to use cloud solutions in this space. Do you see a scenario, you mentioned ecosystems, where actually smaller companies that are more agile, that are working in these ecosystems very tightly, and they're collaborating with each other, powered by AI, the way a big company would, that actually they become more competitive than big companies?
Well, As a founder, I very often get asked, are you not scared of the big companies? Or do you think maybe once you're as big as, I don't know, company X, X that's huge? From the innovation management perspective, I very often get confronted with a very negative connotation concerning large corporations. Well, they're not innovative. And honestly, from my very personal experience, I think the potential lies in exactly these interconnections in the collaboration. And that's not only small companies amongst each other, but especially small and large corporations. And in these scenarios, very often, the narrative is that the large corporation should learn from the small one how to be more agile. Actually, from our day-to-day work, I see that it's definitely a two-way street. Obviously, a large corporation can learn these things from a smaller one, but at the same time, a smaller organization can definitely learn a lot about processes, standardization, and they can use the presence and experience large organizations have. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's only the collaboration of smaller companies that could be successful, but it's really amongst various players in an ecosystem. And that's not even only companies, it could be organizations like associations. So for example, Han very interestingly talked about the health sector. If you look at, for example, rare diseases and how to cure rare diseases, right now we don't really have them in as a focus in large companies because it's just not profitable to develop medicine for rare diseases with only very few users. So these people tend to be very innovative in just tinkering and trying out themselves, which is sometimes extremely dangerous, if you start tinkering with your body and medicine and health. But at the same time, it's a huge source of experience and innovation and creativity. So finding these type of people who are so-called lead users, finding organizations like small startups trying around with new business models, technologies, and combining that with the power that large corporations have, I think that's where the success lies.
We touched on it earlier. It was this sort of this question around data security. How real do you think maybe this is a good question for you, Han, because you sort of have a more global perspective on this, probably. But data security, privacy concerns, the concept of identity is something that China seems to be, at least the perception is from the West, more relaxed about than we are over here in the US and in Europe. How do you deal with that at Tencent? Is this it's probably a topic that comes up, but how is it dealt with? And do you think the sort of data security and identity concerns the West have, are they legitimate, or are they just sort of part of the fear?
Yes, so I always think there's like two different styles or ways to develop an AI. So it's like the Western people always eat soup before eating the meal, right? But Chinese people like to eat soup after the meal. So the data governance, data privacy issue, privacy protection, we will come to that eventually, right? Mm-hmm. Sooner or later, we will come to that. So at Tencent, the data is actually a very, very sensitive topic. So if I say something wrong here, then I will be fired. I won't go back to China anymore. So the thing is that
we're hiring.
The thing at Tencent, we have a very restrictive data management system. So we have a central data platform. So this looks like a supply management system. So all the data sets are put there, but this data set are owned by each team. So each team has to guarantee this data set is legal, and also it doesn't violate any data protection or data privacy issues. If there is something wrong about this data set, then this team actually takes the full responsibility. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but if everything is fine, where most of the time is, right? And the data set can be used by other teams, can be shared to other teams. But this sharing procedure is not just like a download something from the internet. You have to fire an official application procedure to get this data. So in that sense, at Tencent, we have a very strong data barrier between the teams. Although we have a super billion user base, but we have a very strong data barriers that this allow you to use other teams' data in a very, let's say, free manner. Yeah.
Do you have sort of a data police department like that at Wirecard, Kurt?
We do, probably a pretty significant one, right? Because the data we deal with is like super sensitive. It's kind of bank account data, credit card data, etc. So they're pretty high industry standards, compliance rules, tons of data protection people. So I think the way we, however, look at it, here's what I have to do by regulation, and as we all know, Europe's quite strict on our part of the industry, right? But what we've started looking at is what is the opportunity that I can actually generate out of legislation, and Valentin talked about PSD2 today. A lot of banks, a lot of financial services companies are struggling with that. We've actually pretty early looked at what is the opportunity. And I think in order to turn legislation into an opportunity, what we're missing a bit in Europe is consumer education. I think the general rules are okay-ish, I would say. It's just many consumers don't really know what they mean, how they apply, and how can they turn the access they have to their own data into better shopping experience, better offers, and at the end, lower prices for them, right? And that's actually something that we invest a lot of money in. And to pick up on a question that you had earlier, open up the platform kind of for our customers, because I agree that small and medium enterprises that try to sell goods and services online, they might not have big R&D pockets, but there's companies that have developed platforms that they can work with in order to maximize their business value.
You brought up a very good point there about sort of how do we turn legislation into a competitive advantage, and I want to get back to that in a minute. But I just wanted, before I do that, is there anyone in the room who would like to ask a question? No? There's got to be one question. There always is. Okay. I think you all need a big cup of coffee in a minute out there. So, competitive advantage, Jochen, you just mentioned it. How do you think, because you alluded to it just now, how can we in Europe, turn, GDPR, all of this stuff into a competitive advantage, given that, Han is eating his soup after his main course?
I would like to comment on this. I like to eat the soup before the meat. So whenever we start as Kapsch, an AI project, the privacy is the most important point in the beginning. The data scientists are trained on this to have the awareness about the responsibility. If we deal with medical data, we have an independent ethics committee in place with externals who look how the data is handled. When we develop algorithms, we do an anonymization of the data before, so that they're not personalized. Of course, we have all the classical IT tools in place. We operate our 7/24 Cyber Defense Center to avoid any leaks. We do our best, and I think we have a quite state-of-the-art security policy in place. And I think the most important point in this context is we have a different kind of business model. If we develop with customers of us a solution, then if it gives us images to recognize cancer cells, we take these images just for this purpose. If a customer asks us to analyze emails to improve the customer care process and to professionalize it, we do it just for this purpose. Yeah. So the business model of us is not to multiply the data for different kind of purposes. The image is to develop a B2B solution. And I think this could be a competitive advantage to have a clear business model behind this AI project.
Very interesting. So I guess what's your experience at Wirecard? I mean, you've just signed a massive strategic partnership that's going to help you expand into China. How are you, as a German company, sort of thinking about how are you going to stay competitive against both America on the one side and China on the other?
Yeah, the way I take is, there's no the Americans versus the Europeans or the Europeans versus the Chinese or vice versa. I think Europe should do what it's always done, kind of, I'd say, bridging or playing the bridge between, the big superpowers. And if I look at our experience, again, taking what Hans said, from end to end, very little companies can conquer the world on their own, right? And I think that Europe's not doing all so bad, right? In being a bridge into the continent, in offering parts of the platforms, be it the Apples or the Googles of the world, expanding to Europe, but also being the Tencents or the Alibabas expanding into Europe, because we talked a lot about regulation, data privacy. It's not so trivial, right, to expand globally and comply with regulation and rules in every market. So in a nutshell, I think we've got a very open-minded approach here, and coming back to what I said earlier, collaboration is I would say definitely the key, especially in the financial services or banking industry, where there might be, we all think global, but there's a lot of local nuances to how we do our business, and that's where also the big companies and the big tech giants are definitely looking for partnerships.
We're into our final 4 minutes. I'm going to give you one more chance. Is there any other question that you would like to ask? It means we're either doing an extremely good job or we're doing an extremely bad job, and I hope it's the former. Han, you finished your talk with sort of a pause for thought and sort of almost sort of with a cautionary tale that this technology can be used for good or for bad. Is there any application that you are, sort of a single application that you are particularly concerned about, where you think this type of application, I'm a bit worried?
Yeah, I personally am currently worried about this deep fake, or some of you may know that as a deep nude. So this actually creates distrust between people, between those inside the society, and it creates a separation, conspiracy, all these issues. And this is actually based on the state-of-art AI technology. Because I'm an engineer, I know how the algorithm works behind that. It's actually really the state-of-art technology that can create this deep fake or deep nude thing. So this is something that I'm currently very worried about. That actually comes back to the point that I made in my presentation. As an engineer, you yourself has to be aware what are the potential ethical problems that could be occurred or encountered when you develop an algorithm, right? And you have to be aware of this problem and prepare for the ethical issues that are coming after you. Yeah.
Kurt, what do you think?
Not particularly worried, to be honest. It's more, I think, that companies need to, be on top of their responsibility to protect, be it business customers or private customers they're dealing with. And I think the only concern I'd share is maybe that I don't see enough education for young people, going through the digital society and making them aware of what impact potential actions or potential data shares that they may have. And I think that's just all of our responsibility, dealing with consumer data, be it personal data, be it biometric data or financial data.
As you say, a massive challenge for education. Jochen, what about you?
I mean, we know it from former times. You can do different things with a knife. Yeah? And there have always been criminals around, so we have to be aware of this. But nevertheless, I believe in good. We have what we see. We have a lot of amount of data. We double the data size every 2 years, but the productivity stays comparable flat. So we have a huge opportunity and a huge potential to use the data to increase our productivity. Yeah, but nevertheless, we should watch out. It's not about big data. We need the right kind of data. You can read all the blogs with spurious correlations. Just to give an example, yeah, in the US, the consumption of sour cream correlates with the motorcycle drivers killed in an accident. Yeah, so often it doesn't make sense. So please be aware to use the right data, not have spurious correlations. But we have a huge potential to increase the productivity.
Katharina, what do you think?
Well, I get confronted quite a lot with digital warfare, which is one concern I very deeply have, and I think AI can fuel in a way that we cannot even imagine. And honestly, that's, if you talk about fears, the biggest fear I have of something that I cannot even imagine right now. That even with all the digital information I have, it's just not thinkable yet. But at the same time, I really feel bad right now closing this panel with such negative thoughts, and especially in the context that we know, innovation thrives in a culture and an atmosphere of optimism, of positivity, of supporting each other, of seeing the good, And this is actually why, even though with all, the potential concerns we might have, I'm still super optimistic because I do see the positive examples. I do see the positive change AI is bringing to our world, and so I'm with my colleagues on the panel, and especially Hannah, I like what you said, bringing ethic principles, especially, and I'd say, watching on the training of AI, because it's really that is in our hands, If we train an algorithm on racist data, it will be a racist algorithm, and that's something we can prevent and we should prevent, and then I'm super optimistic.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was your panel. We covered at the beginning the importance of human interactions as a way of staying competitive. As humans, we talked about that AI is not going to replace us, but it is going to change what we do and how we do it. It's going to probably fundamentally change the way we organize companies. It may even make companies obsolete. I think we can finish on the note that Han made is that collaboration is going to be key. I think, I can't remember, I think it was Kurt who talked about collaboration across companies, but Han also spoke about collaboration across countries. Yes. And that is one that is central to AI. And let's all hope that collaboration wins the day. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very insightful panel discussion. It gives us a very solid fundament of what's upcoming next.